Why don't we just name it as the title of our podcast? Title, Turtles, Testicles.
Because there's a lot of female reproduction in here as well. So
sorry, women. We're also taking away some of your rights.
Why?
Maybe if I'm a misogynist, I will randomly find crypto lying around.
I don't even know what to say. Let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planet Policy Pals podcast, where I, Ala, and my almost best friend, Ajwa. Hello.
Haha, she says almost, but we both know that's not true.
Okay.
Hi, Ala.
This is a show where we're friends and we just discuss environmental policy and science. Don't forget to hit us up on social media. Our name is Planet Policy Pal everywhere, or Planet Policy Pals. Just search it. You'll find us. Rate and review us. A little disclaimer before we jump into this episode. We use the terms male and female in regards to sex and discuss binary genders in people and animals. We do this because we are speaking from a scientific perspective regarding reproductive systems. We do recognize that sex is not gender, but we are discussing health effects, and so regardless of how you identify, please use this information as it pertains to your reproductive system. We got our first audience question of the series! Yes!
Yay!
Yay! So Darren from Ohio, shout out to our listeners in Ohio, asked us about the new EPA Climate Justice Office. The EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency here in the U.S., are creating a new National Office of Environmental Justice, and President Biden is expected to select a nominee for this office very, very soon. So we're waiting to see. By the way, shout out to the Inflation Reduction Act for providing the springboard for this. Thank you, Darren, for asking us a question and being a supporter of the show. He wants to know how this office will be different from any mechanisms the EPA already has to address environmental inequality. So first off, what's happening here is they're combining three smaller mid-level offices of environmental justice, the Office of Civil Rights, and the Office of Conflict Prevention and Resolution into one high-level office. And like I said, there's going to be a Senate-confirmed assistant administrator who reports directly to the agency administrator, which is good. And for one thing, it is different in the sense that there should be more community involvement. It's more direct, and there should be more oversight since it's more centralized. That's what we're expecting. Ajo, what do you think? Do you think that this system may or may not be an improvement, or have any idea of what goals they could be pursuing?
Okay, so I think it is not a bad idea, personally, because their main goal is really to address the disproportionate harm that pollution and climate change obviously causes in lower income areas and communities of color. There is also a $3 billion block of money that will be used specifically for climate-related grants in these areas. And that's a big deal. We know that, right? They don't really put out money for climate change like that. So this is pretty good news, and it's very welcoming, I would say. And I know it may seem redundant, but it really isn't. Like, having a Senate member to kind of oversee, it will also lend more weight to the decisions that they take, right? Because it's kind of Senate approved at this point. So That's my take.
Real quick, we want to reach out to the victims of Hurricane Ian in Florida. I hope you guys all endured this chaos. Speaking of Florida, a big part of today's topic actually comes from turtles in Florida. Let's talk turtles and testicles. And I should have added this disclaimer, but I have a goal to say testicles at least 5 times this episode. The problem here is that for 4 years, male sea turtles have been declining in the area. And there was a study in Australia that also confirmed this, with about 99% of the hatchlings that were born being female. So it's not something that's just specific to Florida. You know what I mean? The reason for this is rising temperatures, and we have proof, like Audra said. When turtles have turtle sex, unlike with some animals, humans for example, the sex of the baby is not determined right away during fertilization. Like, it doesn't happen right after intercourse where an egg gets fertilized or whatever. It actually happens during incubation after they lay their eggs. So if turtles' eggs incubate below 81.86 Fahrenheit, which is 27.7 Celsius, because this is a global show, the turtle hatchlings will be male. But if they incubate above that temperature, they will be female. And that's what NOAA said. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Even though we've mentioned them 500 times. Y'all should know this by now. This is for our new listeners. Welcome. And of course, less males means less fertilization. So eventually the decline of the entire species of sea turtles if nothing changes. Now, moving on from the turtle testicle shortage, that's number 2, people. There are aspects beyond heat that affect reproductive systems. Hazardous materials. Chemical pollutants is what I mean. Earlier this year, we breached the planetary limit for synthetic hazardous chemicals. I think we discussed this on an episode or with each other. I don't know. But there are over 350,000 human-made chemicals on the market. The number is expected to triple by 2050. And these things are in everything. They're in your medicine, they're in your cream, they're in your soap, they're in your food, they're in your water, they're in the air. So it's more than a land and water crisis or just a general environmental crisis. It's also a health crisis if we look at the biosphere. So today, we're going to discuss the reproductive fallout of these 2 things: rising heat, synthetic chemicals. So Adjoa, before we get into the heat and chemicals of it all, I have a question for you. How serious do you think this is? As someone who hasn't yet had children, but might, I don't know if you want them. This is a huge assumption because you've never been clear on that. But how worried are you about about the possibilities of this becoming a problem?
And she calls me her best friend. Okay, I do want to have children. But even as somebody who does want children, I am not at all worried about it. Okay. Well, firstly, because I hardly think that this is true, right? Like, we're not getting this thing anytime soon. Like, guys, calm down. But even if it were true, honestly, it doesn't really mean no more babies. It's just like a reduced rate, which honestly would be a blessing in disguise, given, like, you know, the very limited number of resources that we have left. And our growth rates are doing pretty okay for now. So, you know, we'll be fine. Let's kind of make sure that we have enough room for the people who are already here. And I think we're still struggling for that. So sorry to break your little Elon Musk bubble. The human race is not dying off in any projected future.
This man's name. Anyway, I do want to make, like, this is more of a socio-economic issue than it is a scientific or environmental one. Even though human population isn't dropping, and not to be Elon Musky about this, developed countries and like places like the US, China, Europe, they are seeing younger rates. They're seeing lower rates of young people. And what this means is that there's a lot of old people on Social Security in these countries, and not enough young people are working, and there's not enough young people being born. So by the time it's our turn to cash in on Social Security, we might be on our own.
Can I just tell you? So I read this study, and this is a really interesting study. So they found that as climate change kind of like the crisis deepens and everything, and as global warming goes up, we will obviously face food shortages and food scarcity. That will kind of send a lot of agriculture, you know, rising up. Agriculture is going to be a hot sector, you know, with food scarcity and everything. A lot of the hotter countries, and especially countries that depend a lot on agriculture, they will actually see a rise in their growth rates because they don't really need that many resources for their children, because you don't need skilled labor to work in agriculture, right? So they will not be spending a lot of their money or a lot of their energy on educating their children, while people in up north in cooler countries and where agriculture is not their main focus, or, you know, it's not a part of their economy, those countries will see a drop in their growth rates.
Now that we've talked a lot about growth rates, speaking of the whole heat thing, how does that affect reproduction in animals and stuff?
Since aquatic and amphibian life seems to be the most affected, we'll get into those first. So under the waves and in the ocean, climate change is kind of like a third wheel, right? It's just like if you're going out on a date with you and a significant other, and there's this friend that just doesn't leave you alone. Every time you try to get into the corner, that friend is just there. You know, so climate change is kind of doing that for them. Climate change, it continuously prevents the seduction and reproductive success of pretty much all kinds of marine creatures.
I'm so sorry. Did you say the seduction success?
Yeah. Because, animals have this whole mating routine, so do humans. So they're not being as successful. They're like, how a lot of single people complain now? Me included, how the dating pool is really shit.
I've heard. I do not know personally. Sucks for you guys, I guess. I don't know.
It does. But yeah, that's basically what the marine life is saying as well. The dating pool literally is the dating ocean for them, is not doing too well. None of their advances are working the way they used to. They used to get a lot of, mates before with the moves they did. And now it's not working out anymore. The reason for that is basically these strategies, they rely really heavily on the conditions of the surrounding environment. And many marine animals like sea urchins or corals and clownfish, they rely on water conditions for reproduction, right? Because they reproduce externally, meaning that the eggs are fertilized outside of the animal's body in the water.
Kind of like the turtles.
Yes, kind of like the turtles. So they have to really make sure that the environment that these eggs are going to be fertilized in are favorable, right? So these animals, they depend on specific cues and conditions in the environment to kind of signal mating season. They have currents, temperature, salinity, light, acidity. All of these are factors that dictate when and how successfully different marine organisms are going to reproduce. And this is where climate change actually makes romance very difficult for these people.
So marine life, they need Hinge and Tinder? Actually, maybe not Tinder. Tinder destroyed the dating pool up here.
Yeah, I don't think they need more like Bumble. A woman-read dating site.
Oh, here she goes. There she is.
As you know, and if you heard our previous episodes, many of them, where we told you that climate change is directly correlated with increasing levels of carbon dioxide, and that's a very potent greenhouse gas. It's in the Earth's atmosphere, and increasing these levels of carbon dioxide has obviously been linked to warmer and more acidic oceans. It has disrupted nutrient and chemical cycles as well as altered oceanic currents. So we know it's not good. And changing even one of these factors can really kill the mood under the sea, and it really has disastrous consequences on food webs and the environment. But that's not the only issue. Another issue of harming the planet the way that we are, especially with our chemicals, is that we're releasing xenoestrogens into our water sources. Now, what are xenoestrogens? Well, they're a kind of hormone that is produced outside of the body. So they basically have the same properties as hormones that are produced inside our body. And that's why they're like a type of xenohormone, which is what the word is for hormones that are produced outside of your body. Right. So xenoestrogens are basically estrogens that are produced either synthetically or naturally, and they mimic and interfere with natural functions of estrogens within the body, and they obviously adversely affect fish reproduction. We all know what estrogen does to you. Where do we get these from? Pesticides, plastics, wastewater. They're basically all sources of xenoestrogens, and they are carried through surface runoffs to water bodies at concentration levels that are actually harmful to aquatic animals. Fish absorb these xenoestrogens through ingestion of contaminated food items or through respiratory gills and dermal contact. Xenoestrogens, they bioaccumulate in fish tissue, which means that while they're small, in small doses, they're not bad, but over time they kind of keep building up in the tissue, and that leads to various reproductive abnormalities. Like, for example, males may abnormally produce vitellogenins. Males may abnormally produce vitellogenins. Okay, listen, there were too many big words. What do you want me to do? Do you know how many times I had to go over this? And I still can't do it.
And just so you guys, like, vitellogenins are usually found in female egg-laying species because they're the hormones that are in egg yolks. That's what they help happen. So they shouldn't be in males. That's the problem with them. And so that leads to reduced sperm counts. While that happens to males, females experience just a low hatchability of eggs. So through the food web, once fish has eaten or absorbed these xenoestrogens, they're going to biomagnify in anything that eats fish. That could be seals, humans, or even bigger fish. And that can in turn
risk the suffering from reproductive malfunctions. So if you're eating fish that has been contaminated, you are contaminated, basically.
It reminds me of that. You know, that's how they had the mercury issue in Japan decades ago. It was because people in Japan consume a lot of seafood, and these chemicals, they bond to fat. And so they stay in the fatty tissue. And when things are in fatty tissue, they don't come out as easily. When something is bonded to a lipid, like you have with fats, they tend to stick there. And so that's why it's so easy for you to eat something contaminated from the sea more than it is from land.
Yeah, what Ala said. She's right. And what Ala said is true, but what's interesting is that studies have actually shown that there is an adverse impact of xenoestrogens on fish, but that has been limited to developed countries. Yet fish are actually a major food and trade commodity for developing sub-Saharan and African countries.
Yes, I can confirm.
Yeah, so either the studies weren't carried out there, or it's just the way that we consume given our GDPs.
It's also like, you know, there's that bias when it comes to academic research and writing.
Yeah, so it could be either or, you know. It could also be that we use less chemicals, we use less products that carry these chemicals as opposed to developed countries, you know.
Fair.
As we've talked about many times before. Although, like I said, there's a lot of impact on marine life and aquatic life. What about the land? I'm pretty sure when climate change isn't doing any favors there either.
It is not. So animals on land are also affected by climatic factors that include things like temperature, humidity, radiation, and wind. When you have extremes in climate, you then have energy transfer being altered between animals and their environment. And I don't know if you guys know this, but even in mammals, the way that heat works is crucial to your reproductive system. Seasonal variation in environment, nutrition, and how the animals are managed, which is why we always try to eat, you know, cruelty-free or wear cruelty-free, they alter the estrus activity, which is basically fertility-related activity, and also they alter the estrus cycle and how long it lasts. That estrus cycle is the period that covers one ovulation to the next. And when that cycle is messed with, then when you have eggs present for fertilization or when you don't have them, then you're not going to produce as you should. Endocrine functions, which the endocrine system is just your hormonal system, they're altered by these extremes. When you have hypothermia, where it's super hot, like we get with these heat waves, then your adrenal function is reduced. Your adrenal gland doesn't produce hormones like it should. And what this happens is it allows it does it so that the animal can cope with the environment. But in order to do that, you have less production of glucocorticoids, which are just things like cortisol, right? These are steroid hormones that your body would normally use to fight inflammation and to strengthen your muscles, stuff like that. So that's what's happening to these land mammals. Especially, I think it happens a lot to cattle. So estrogens are lower during the period before ovulation. That period is called proestrus, if you care. And also during the period of regression that usually comes after ovulation. So when an animal is in heat just before that ovulation period starts, like before heat actually, you have that prep period, and it allows the animal's body to get ready for the ovulation cycle, which is estrus. And then afterwards, as we can all attest, even human females, ovulation is pretty rough on you sometimes. So the body's trying to rest. Mm-hmm. But this extreme heat messes with that process. And then when the cycle is off, you can have later gestation than you're supposed to. And then you have physiological outcomes from this because there's a shorter duration of the cycle. You have lower birth rates in cows. So calves are smaller than they should be, which can affect their health down the line. So seasons are just altering hormonal levels across the board. They can also cause infertility in the male animals. So overall, not great when it comes to the heat.
The question, I guess, all of Twitter wants to know is, what is it doing to humans?
right? I know that's why you guys are here. I'm going to use a cool study that I found by an environmental economist. Let me just say, they have an environmental everything, okay?
Yeah.
So this environmental economist at UCLA, Alan Baraka, he released findings suggesting that heat might be affecting our birth rates. So shout out to everybody with African or Asian parents like us. Send them that article and explain that you will get married and have kids soon. You just want the earth to cool down a little bit first.
That's a good idea. Can we send postcards?
I know, right? I hope my mother listens to this episode. Mommy, are you listening? This is the reason. So the study found that hot weather reduces birth rates 8 to 10 months after like a huge heat wave has occurred, with the largest reduction at 9 months after. And I thought that was interesting because, I don't know, I feel like summer is when everybody tries to make babies anyway. But a modest rebound in birth rates is observed if you wait 11 to 13 months after high temperatures. So if you are planning to have your baby, I guess just try in the winter when it's cold and you're locked inside. And with heat waves coming earlier and being more intense, it could be an area for further research, of course. It's not that people are having less intercourse, by the way. People are still having tons of sex, okay? It's just that when it's hot, it seems that there's lower sperm production, and that is what's causing the conception issue. However, while research in the animals confirms that this is a bigger problem for males, we do need additional research to be very sure that in male humans, that's what's causing their sperm production issues. Now, I should add a caveat because, of course, this research did not extend far enough. Developing nations like the ones in sub-Saharan Africa or nations like India that are super hot are not seeing overall declines in birth rate. And I think we discussed that earlier. There's a lot of mitigating factors, but it could also be due to the fact that those places are so freaking hot that the men there have already adapted to the heat, and so they'll just keep producing sperm.
Please stop.
I'm just saying. Look, Nigerian men are proof.
For the love of God.
They just keep producing sperm, and they're just out there just making babies. They're just making babies. Keep in mind, though, that seasonal temperature studies have not been carried out in these places as much, and so this is just an overall theory. I do want to see what further research can show us, though. I mean, that would be cool. But enough about heat, guys. We get it. Temperatures are rising. Damn. Adjoa, let's talk about some chemicals.
There's a lot of chemicals, and a lot of them have a lot of problems. We can't cover all of them in this short time with you guys, so we are going to focus on the most prevalent ones, and we did back this up with enough research and case studies, so hope this helps keeping you informed.
Yes, guys, read the show notes. Ask Adjoa. I spend hours on that thing.
Yeah, shout out to you, girl.
Thank you.
So, a very commonly used pesticide is DDT. DDT is diphenyl trichloroethane.
Ooh.
And it is not a fun chemical. I think we've covered this in a few episodes before.
I think we have.
But what does it do for reproductive systems? Well, one of the main metabolite of this is 1,1-dichloro-2,2-bis-4-chlorophenylethylene, and direct exposure to this metabolite is actually found to be strongly associated with sperm immobility and mitochondrial dysfunction, and it is in a very concentration-dependent manner. So basically, it really depends on how much of it are you exposed to. The main metabolite of DDT is actually an anti-androgenic, and it binds to androgen receptors and hence inhibits the action of testosterone. Now, what is androgenic? Androgenic is basically anything that relates to the male reproductive system.
Yeah, especially when young males are going through puberty, they need the androgenic hormones to develop facial hair and for their muscles to form the way that they're supposed to. So the less you have of that, the more issues you're going to have with that kind of male growth stage.
Yes, and that's basically, when they make fun of you and tell you you don't have enough testosterone.
Oh, Lord.
That's it. That's what causes it. Anyway, in women, it also does things. It binds to the estrogen receptor and it induces biological responses, despite the fact that this chemical is not actually structurally similar to the naturally occurring estrogen that we have in our body. So chemical binding to this estrogen receptor has been linked to neoplasms and obviously adverse reproductive outcomes. So exposure to DDT during pregnancy, it also results in low birth weight and small skull circumferences in children. So I know what you're thinking, it's been banned in the US for almost 50 years, but that doesn't actually mean that they are gone. They persist in the environment for like years after use and are actually known as legacy pesticide, so they can still have impacts on fertility.
And I will say organochemicals like DDT and Pcbs, they didn't get banned globally till 2001. So there are countries where there's still products that contain them. And like I just said, they're in your food and your water already. So, good luck. They're also in really old electrical equipment like transformers and things like that. Yeah.
Well, that was for DDTs. There are other things like dioxins, which are a group of highly persistent lipophilic chemicals. And as I explained earlier, lipophilic chemicals are things that are very easily absorbed into the fat. So they're produced as a byproduct to several industrial and natural processes like smelting, chlorine bleaching of paper and pulp. So next time you want to print 50 pages, rethink it.
Yep.
And even in some production of pesticides, biomedical and plastic, waste incineration, etc. So like I said, it's very soluble in fat. And guess who has a lot of fat?
Us.
Yep. TCDD, which chemically is 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorodibenzoparadioxin.
Ooh, again.
Did I sound like I'm saying a dirty dozen?
Oh boy.
Because that's what it is, okay? It is a dirty dozen cluster of hazardous chemicals, by the way, which are also known as persistent organic pollutants that we've mentioned many times before.
Yes.
Also called POPs. Ala loves these acronyms. They're her favorite.
I do. I love the chemical ones. I hate the organizational ones.
So anyway, the reason why they're called persistent organic pollutants are because they resist biological and environmental degradation, as explained before. Also, they're very toxic, right? Again, kind of like that X. They are known to cause serious reproductive, developmental, and cancer problems, right? They act as endocrine disruptors and they mediate the effect of those hormones. So in rats, in utero and lactational exposure to TCDD, it alters the duration of the estrous cycle, like Ala explained before. It decreases fertility, induces abnormal development of the vaginal canal and external genitalia. It decreases ovarian weight by 25%, and it also causes abnormal growths to form inside the uterus. That's for rats. For women, though, they haven't actually found anything that is very well defined. They have done some studies, but they've been really small studies. And they do point or hint towards endometriosis, but these are from very small studies, like I said. So it's still quite inconclusive. And we really need to study women more, please.
Yeah, we need some more conclusion on this. So when it comes to these chemicals Audra has mentioned, there is significant evidence that continuous and prolonged exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, a risk factor for reduced fertility and fecundity in women. So fecundity is the biological ability to reproduce based on the monthly probability that you will conceive, while fertility is the ability to become pregnant after 12 months of unprotected intercourse. So that's the difference between those two, in case you were wondering. There's also evidence that prolonged exposure has transgenerational effects. So it can affect your offspring. If you are prolonged to it and then you have a baby, they can have some of those issues. Endocrine disruptors are external substances like the xenoestrogens Audra mentioned earlier that affect your endocrine system, like the hormone things like your thyroid and the balance of your sex steroids. There are a lot, so we're just going to cover two of the big guns. Research does tell us that in women, it can lead to multiple issues like aneuploidy, which is when you have an abnormal number of chromosomes in one set. You can see the effect of that in something like Down syndrome, polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, where you have too much of a male hormone called androgen, which we explained what that was earlier, and cyst sacs on your ovaries and super painful periods that last too long. Endometriosis, where the cells similar to the lining of your uterus grow outside of the uterus, and it's super painful as well. And then we can also have abnormal menstrual cycles. Also in women, when it comes to uterus disorders, you can have uterine fibroids, you can have disorders of placental function, adverse pregnancy outcomes like early pregnancy, loss, recurrent miscarriages, fetal growth restriction, disorders of the breast as well, like breast cancer, or the inability to lactate for a long period of time. And it also messes with puberty. In men, you can have sperm production issues, early erectile dysfunction, abnormal morphology in the sperm, which I was wondering what abnormal sperm morphology would be like. And it's just like the size and the shape of the sperm isn't what it should be, as well as sperm motility issues. So the sperm isn't moving as quickly as it should. It's slow sperm. It needs to pick it up. So, like I said, let's hit two of the big guns. Let's talk about phthalates. Phthalic acid diesters, phthalates, are a class of synthetic chemicals with a lot of functions. They're in a lot of things. They're in your plastics. They're in medications. They're in scent retainers, in your cosmetics. And so they're in damn near everything in your life. In men, they work like estrogen, and they counter the effects of testosterone, which impacts men's libido and fertility.
Libido?
Yes, I meant libido. Libido. I can't say that word, okay?
I hope you can feel it.
Girl, stop. The problem is more serious in older men and younger men going through puberty. Pregnant women who are exposed to multiple phthalates during pregnancy also have an increased risk of preterm birth, according to studies that came out very recently by the National Institute of Health. Apart from phthalates, there are so many, but I want to mention heavy metals because they're very serious. They're in your food chain. They're in your food. They're in flour, rice, sugar, and seafood, like we mentioned earlier. Audra explained with aquatic life. And they counter estrogen in women, which can affect a range of fertility and developmental issues. They're also in cigarettes and vapes, so... Humans and wildlife are exposed to lead in water, food, soil, air. Even your house paint still has lead if you have an old house. So in women, there have been links to increased risk of spontaneous miscarriage, intrauterine fetal death, where the baby dies while it's still in utero, preterm delivery, and exposure to lead can also affect the libido. Oh, I said it, in women as well. And it can affect the libido in men as well as their semen quality by reducing their sperm count, their motility, the viability, the integrity, my God, and cause an elevation in morphological abnormalities. And the sperm DNA integrity as well. Man, you guys, sperm is going through it. Semen is fucked.
That's my biggest takeaway from this episode.
Me too. Semen quality is a measure of male fertility. It's a measure of your ability of sperm and semen to do what they're supposed to do and fertilize eggs. And so when you have the weird size and shape of sperm, they measure it by this percentage of semen that looks normal under a microscope. This is not a prompt for men to start taking their semen to labs and asking to look under a microscope.
This is a disclaimer.
I'm just telling you what it is. But yeah, we can't get into all of the other things that could be causing you problems are PCBs, found mainly in fish, meat, and dairy, but also sometimes in the air. PFAs, which we discussed this on the fashion episode because they're used as coatings for stain, water, and sweat resistant stuff. BPA, I know you all know that one. That's bisphenol A. And it's found in a lot of your plastics. It's especially of concern because not only does it affect your reproductive system, it also affects the brain and prostate gland of fetuses, infants, and children. And there's also other phenols, which are super bad. I should add, another thing that could be a problem is testicle atrophy. That's number 3, guys. I'm saying testicles so much. That word is so funny to me. I need to grow up. But testicle atrophy is when your testicles shrink, and if it gets really severe, blood supply can be cut off, and then you have a testicle medical emergency. So go to the hospital if that happens. That's 4. I'm almost at 5, you guys. Woohoo! Okay. But now that we've talked about all the heat and chemical issues and all the things that can go wrong with your reproductive system, let's see how some countries are trying to regulate and maybe make things better for you.
Well, like we said many times, and the reason why we found so many studies is because pretty much all of us are exposed to it, okay? Doesn't matter where you live. You have a bunch of these chemicals around you. If you're eating food that was grown in a farm, it probably had pesticides. It probably had a lot of the stuff that we've mentioned, DDT, dioxins. If you've gotten gym clothes recently, you've probably been exposed to PFAs. So clearly, not a lot is happening on the regulation end, or you wouldn't be seeing a lot of this.
The issue really, I think, is like, apart from stopping it, it's now in the system. It is very hard to get these things out entirely.
Yeah. And it's not like they're doing really good at trying to do that anyway, like, get it out of it. There are no recent rules in the US on phthalates, and states pretty much have been left to roll out their own regulations on these chemical classes. In May 2022, the FDA declined to ban phthalates in food packaging, by the way. And at the same time, the agency acknowledged that its safety assessment for food contact users of phthalates is out of date. And they did request new information from the public. So they're like, you know what, make a case and we'll ban it. Right now, sorry. Isn't it their job?
So the thing about this, so like dioxins, DDTs, Pcbs, PFAs, a lot of those things are regulated, and a lot of them are not even allowed to be put in products if they're produced in the US or in most countries. I think dioxin, like all the POPs are global, okay? But the thing about phthalates is they are used in a lot of stuff. So it becomes unfortunately, it becomes more than a health issue, and becomes an economic issue, where if they ban it, then a lot of industries have to adjust. You know what I mean? I think that's the sticky thing here. But a lot of states have regulation for phthalates. I think the bigger problem is countries that have no regulation for phthalates at all. So I have to say, the Registration, Evaluation, Authorization, and Restriction of Chemicals, REACH, in the EU has had such a great impact. I mean, they put this thing in 2006, and it is so effective that so many countries model their own regulation after it. Like it's true, the US got there first, but REACH is far more comprehensive, and it updates pretty regularly. So I gotta give that to the EU. Another loss for the UK. I don't know why they left. I really don't. So let's talk about what you can do. There was a study in Taiwan on reducing phthalate exposure in young girls, and experts suggested washing your hands more often, not using plastic containers without BPA seals, not eating food with plastic bags or wraps. Good luck. Not microwaving your food. Please, I cannot.
Okay.
And not taking nutritional supplements. And reducing the use of cosmetics or personal care products. Okay. Now let's give you some realistic solutions. Because
yes, please.
Be for real. If you can afford to buy organic foods some or all of the time, you can reduce your exposure to pesticides. So do that. Eat more fresh foods, vegetables, patronize like your local farms if you can. Eat less processed stuff like the flour we mentioned. Eat less meat. Ugh, okay, these people have to be stopped.
You people have to be stopped.
All
but
right.
Okay.
All right. Try to reduce the amount of takeout food that you get, only because takeout food is stored in plastic and styrofoam, which almost always has one of these things, like most of the time, at least the phthalates. Even the paper and cardboard ones do as well. I don't know what we're going to do, guys. Food packaging, it's laden with PFAs. Like they use it to make your container like leak resistant. So that's a problem. Don't eat things that come in microwave. Microwave ready food. Try not to eat those. Again, I don't know. Good luck, guys. Use wood, glass, or metal in your kitchen instead. And if you don't filter your water, it's time to start. Also, I'm not saying drink bottled water, for the love of God. I hate those plastic bottles. Just buy a filter for your tap or a filtering container. Also, this is not a joke. Wear less perfume, cologne, and makeup. Use scent-free products and deodorants if you can, especially if you're pregnant. After this, I feel like I sound like fucking Kourtney Kardashian or something, but it is what it is. Even your cleaning and laundry products should be scent free. So if you can buy from like eco-friendly companies and you can check the ingredients, you're better off. If you can use natural cleaners, you're better off. But I don't know, guys. A lot of this advice is geared towards people who have money. So you do the best that you can to just limit your exposure. You know, if you do a lot of these things, but you do them less, you're better off.
Yeah. And if you're not better off enough to make these changes, how are you going to afford a baby? So really rethink it.
So, yeah, just reduce, like we always say. Adjoa, how realistic are these solutions and recommendations to you?
We were laughing through half of them. How realistic do you really think they are? I mean, these are really good measures to avoid at times, you know. Do the best. Just cherry pick, guys.
Yeah.
Do what works for you. Think of it like a religion. Okay?
Oh, Jesus. Oh my God, please. If we ever get like social media famous, somebody will bring up this episode and they will just massacre us.
So, Ala, are we in a reproductive crisis? You know, like Elon Musk says, oh my God, we're in alert mode.
Oh God.
Or like, you know, due to this heat and chemicals and all this stuff that we've mentioned, like, gotta rank 1, 2 big facts.
So I'm going to say both of these are going to become more of an issue if they're already kind of an issue, especially in children. I myself struggle with one of the conditions mentioned in this episode, and more women are coming out and saying, like, especially in their 30s, seeing these reproductive issues and fertility issues. So we need safer products, if not for us, for the children that Elon Musk and Nick Cannon are having all over the place. Also, the way everything affects sperm, testicles, and testosterone, I would say men should be very worried at this point. I mean, women too. We do need more studies, but y'all should be worried about your testicles. Oh my God, I said it 6 times. Wow, I really won. I'm going to rank this at a very serious 9.65, guys, because I think it's a serious issue.
Are you serious? Okay, well, this is where we're going to differ massively. So while it might be a health issue, and I agree with you there, I don't think that the human race is dying off, so we don't need to like create a whole alarming situation around it. But with respect to health crisis, I do think that it is serious and we should address it. I will rank it a comfortable 8.
Okay. You know, it's not that the entire human race is like growth population is stalling. It's that white people's growth is stalling. White people are having less babies, y'all. It's their problem mostly. I'm just saying.
And none of us are complaining, so...
Oh, girl! Oh, Lord. All right. Audience question.
What do you guys think? You know what? This is one of those things where I want to know where you rate it with respect to how serious of a concern do you think this is. Not the health crisis part. I think we addressed that. Do you think actually we should be worried about the human race in any future of your projection? Do let us know. An organization that we would like to highlight this week is Biz NGO, and like their name suggests, they work with NGOs and businesses to promote the creation and adoption of safer chemicals and sustainable materials, thereby creating market transitions in a healthy economy, healthy environment, and healthy people.
We love it.
They're doing pretty decent work. Please check them out. They're pretty cool. Thank you so much for joining us. There would be no show without you guys, so we are very glad to have you here with us. Next week, we will be talking about our seasons ending. Are we going to see more extremes and none of this fall and spring and summer and winter and all these transitions that we all love so much? Join us next week to find out. We will bring you guys some interviews in the coming weeks.
Yay!
So stay tuned for that. Follow us on Twitter at Planet Policy Pal, Instagram at Planet Policy Pals, or find us on Facebook with the same name. Email questions and comments to planetpolicypals@gmail.com or hit us up in our DMs. Please rate and review us because Ala wants that.
I do.
And have a great rest of your week, guys. And until next time,
keep learning, pals.